Take this easy. Richard Webb, Station Chief, Beirut.
He was my father. He started Treadstone.
He hired you to put me under surveillance. Why? Jeez. Why did he hire you?
Don't say anything, Smith.
No. No.
There's no sign of him.
What do you want us to do?
Work your way down the canal. I'll circle around and meet you there.
You followed me to Beirut. The last time I saw my father. Why would he have you follow me? It doesn't make any sense. Why?
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 227 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm Becca and as always joined by my fellow co-hosts and film buffs, Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
I'm feeling very buffy, thank you.
Buffy?
I'm a film buff.
Oh, right. I was trying to...
Not Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, I was trying to think where like, you know, Sarah Michelle Gellar was in this film or something. I was like, did Anthony Head
appear?
The
Buffy podcast.
I'm feeling buffy, just give me a moment.
Well, the thing is, just before... I know what's happened there. Just before we were recording, folks, we were talking about the last Thor film, because I saw it last night. And he's obviously thought about, like, Hemsworth's butt shot in it, and immediately had to say the word
He's
Buffy.
feeling very buff.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. For my introduction, I have, just literally written in front of me, fellow co-hosts, but I always try to add something in. And obviously we're Bond fans, we're film fans. So yeah, just any old rubbish just comes out, I'm afraid. I tried to pick something that's kind of appropriate to the series, like when we do the Hobbit or Lord of the Rings series, I shall sprinkle something in. All kinds of rubbish that pops up.
If it's a Hobbit reference, don't refer to us as short. That could give us
No, I won't. That's my
that
job.
could give the wrong impression.
I'm like a Hobbit-sized person, being 5'1", so I'm the resident Hobbit.
Yeah.
So...
If I was in proportion, I'd be 5'1". Yeah. There was a basketball. Yeah, no, it was a small penis joke, Becca. I remember there was a basketball player in America where like it was a female like interviewer in the locker room or something, and he was like 7'3" or something, and she said cheekily, "Are you in proportion?" And he said, "No, if I was in proportion, I'd be 8'11".
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to stand away over there somewhere and be like, ah.
Yeah. So, what are we covering tonight?
Tonight we reach the end of our Jason Bourne journey as we review Jason Bourne, starring Matt Damon, Tommy Lee Jones, Riz Ahmed, Alicia Vikander, Vincent Cassel, Julia Stiles, the score by David Buckley and John Powell. Not forgetting Moby's Extreme Ways plays over the end of the credits as it has done in the previous films. Written by Paul Greengrass and Christopher Rouse and directed by Paul Greengrass and released in 2016.
Just some points to make at the outset of this. I don't want to say a lot. I mean, my worry is I watched this nearly a week ago. We were going to record midweek and we've had COVID in the house. I haven't had it personally, but we had COVID in the house. And recent travel on my path, I was the one who cried off midweek. But I was only a couple of days from having to see it, from having seen it. And honestly, 5 or 6 days later, I'm struggling with this film to remember it. But we'll get into that. Just some points of change. The cinematographer is a change. He's worked with Catherine Bigelow before, and he goes on to work with Greengrass again. But it's not the guy who did the previous entries with Greengrass. David Buckley, I don't know massively well. He was a relatively young composer at this point. But he did go on to do The Nice Guys the same year, The Master, and no, it's not that The Master though, not the one with Philip Seymour Hoffman. And then he's done averagey things like the Papillon remake and Angel Has Fallen, and a bit B-list to be honest with you. What else did I want to say? In terms of a script, Christopher Rouse wrote with him on this, and again, really sort of best known as an editor, to be honest with you. He wrote on this, but his whole filmography is things like Fast and Furious films, other things with Jason Bourne, the Italian Job remake from 2003. So there's a lot of changes.
That's terrible.
It is. Well, what's odd about the Italian Job remake from 2003 is, I think on point one, it wasn't as bad as I feared. I thought it was going to be terrible. But what I will say,
I thought it was, and it was.
But the car, but the car chases were better in the 60s. There was a real majesty about the three minis riding in formation in the 60s films, and the established shots and the way it was done. And it was
the action scenes are great, but I just felt Wahlberg was.
I thought they were worse. But anyway, I didn't think it was a great film, and it's no one remembers it now. Really, we remember it because we were around when it came out. But if you said Italian Job to most people now, they'd still think Michael Caine. So I think the point is there's quite a few changes behind the scenes this time, but it's still Greengrass and Matt Damon. I think just as a little bit of background from me on when I went to see it, avoiding first thoughts for a minute. When you bring out a film series back after a very long period of time, where maybe they've said for a few years, not interested, but I'll come back if that director come back. A bit like if Bale did come back and do another Batman film with Nolan. If they announced that now, it would be odd, given we have had the Matt Reeves version, which was very good in my opinion. But you would naturally start thinking, oh, they must have a brilliant idea. You know, you can't. They aren't the sort of people that just come back for a paycheck. You know, particularly when Damon's career was in good health. So I think at the outset I went into this film kind of jazzed for it because Tommy Lee Jones. It feels like another upgrade again. You've had David Strathairn, and you've had Brian Cox, and you've had Albert Finney, though he was a bit wasted. Now you've got Tommy Lee Jones, who is like a proper A-lister at this stage, rather than was. The bad guy was going to be Vincent Cassel, and you think, well, that's kind of an upgrade on what we've had before. Alicia Vikander's career was really hot at this point after things like Ex Machina and so on, although this was pre the Tomb Raider film she did.
That's from Little House near me.
The Tomb Raider. We may do the Tomb Raider films sometime. No one's ever asked for them, but we might do. Let's see. Maybe when the sequel comes out.
No one's asked for it.
No one's asked for it, but you're getting it. No,
it's anyway.
No, I'm saying if this Tomb Raider sequel they're talking about came out, and let's say it was good, we might think, let's look at all of them. But
we might consider
it.
One of them has Daniel Craig in it, even though he's not good.
Yeah, that was in 2001. It wasn't quite Daniel Craig as he became. Yeah, although the first one stylistically was really accurate to the games. And the second film probably did more to make a star of Gerard Butler than anything else.
So that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always a fine balance, isn't it? Especially where Lara Croft is concerned as well. You kind of got that balance between action and adventure. So also being a female Indiana Jones as well. So.
What I could liken this to is, it's those two things. So the first thing is, it's a bit like if Nolan and Bale came back now after a decade. You go, wow, you really must have something to say here. We can't guarantee the end result because I didn't love The Dark Knight Rises, but that's a good filmmaker and a very honest actor in that he does stuff that genuinely seems to interest him and gives his all to it. But the extra dimension would be what we've had since is Batman in the sort of Snyderverse, but we've also had Batman in a Matt Reeves film as like an A-list Hollywood release, really, if you like. I guess what it would be more like is had they carried on, but with the Blake character as Batman. If Joseph Gordon-Levitt had made a Batman film like 3 or 4 years later, with the Blake character as the new Batman, that would have been a bit more then had they come back. So I went in extremely excited about this. It did very well. It had a decent budget. It's the second highest grossing of the Bourne films. It did $415 million. For context, I think the second or third one, whichever one it was, I said did 440 something. So I just think at the outset, I just want to say, when it came out, it was one of my films of the summer that I was like desperate to go and see. What about you guys? Did you see it at the time?
Yeah, I slightly missed this one at the cinema, and I literally have not seen it until this podcast. So yes, I shall reveal my thoughts shortly. Chris?
Before Chris comes in, what made you avoid it? Was there a lack of interest? Was it the fact you didn't like the Bourne legacy? Was it other things going on in life? Because we were going as a podcast at that point, so
we were at this time. I think it just slipped my radar. It was kind of something that I wanted to see, but I didn't get to see it at the cinema.
So it wasn't a conscious avoid, is what I mean.
No. It's just literally accidental. A lot of films like that, for example, I might miss at the cinema because it was just before 2016. So it was going through a bit of upheaval at that time. It was just before I moved. Going to cinema was quite expensive in the last few years. So it literally just slipped my radar. I wasn't like, oh, I hate that. Well, obviously the last film was sort of a mixed bag. Literally just dropped off on my radar really. I was doing other things, and just obviously time went, and I just never saw it. And then it was on Film 4 in January, so I recorded it off the telly, and then watched it for this podcast. So that was it really. That's my journey. It's not very exciting, nothing really on purpose. But yeah, I just dropped off my radar and hadn't seen it since, and saw it for here, pretty much. So anyway, Chris, I know you guys are the action junkies.
Yeah, I did see it at the cinema. Did we do a summer review of this? I can't remember.
We did.
I was gonna say,
we did. If you go back
it's been
to the first,
crazy. It's been that
a long time ago.
No, the first summer review we ever did was 2016, and it was Chris's idea. He was like, I think maybe we were on a bit of a hiatus or something, or I think it may even be one weekend Becca wasn't available, and Chris said, let's just go on and record something anyway, and we just chatted through films we'd
we'll
seen
have to go
that
a long
summer.
way back on the thread to find out what the reason
it would
was.
be the Cinematronics podcast, and it would be episode, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, somewhere around there. And we definitely talked about this film. Maybe when in first thoughts I'll reveal what we said there, but I know you saw it at the time. Were you excited for it coming back after a decade? Or
you know what, I kind of can't remember. I think because I was never always like a Jason Bourne fan, but even though I would always watch it if it came out and have with certain expectations, think, oh, this should be good kind of thing. But I was never like full on excited. I think because of like after the last one with Damon felt like, well, that just feels like a natural end of the story's character, and the last week's film we covered didn't really go anywhere. It just felt like oh, okay, well, let's see what this one's like then. You know what I mean? It was it didn't really sort of have like, I didn't have too much riding on it, though. Given the talent involved, it's like, well, should be decent enough.
I had one worry going in, and I'm reminded of something you said to me in a podcast years ago, not about this film, and I can't even remember what podcast it was on. I suspect it might have been one of the Rocky films, and the reason I say that is we were likely to be talking about Carl Weathers, because we were talking about why he wasn't a bigger star, and so if I had to guess, it would be Rocky or Rocky 2. If I had to really pin my colours to the mast, it would be Rocky 2, because we were talking about what a good physical actor he was in that fight, because at the end of that fight he's exhausted and they're both out on his feet, and he sells it even better than Sly. And I remember talking about how much of being a star is luck and timing and everything else, and why wasn't he a bigger star. And I think I said something like, if it ever was to have happened, it would have been Action Jackson. And you said, and I said, but I must admit, I've never seen it. And you said, and I don't remember your exact words, but it was something along the lines of, Action Jackson was like a hair metal band, like an 80s cock rock band releasing an album just as Nevermind comes out.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Because I've heard that analogy before, so I've used it. So, but that's kind of what it's like.
And I thought that this is the year Civil War comes out. It's a year after Age of Ultron. It's 4 years on from. I know it's not a superhero film, but it's in the action genre. The Nolan Batman films had finished a bit on the weak side, and I just thought the previous Nolan trilogy had been shaky cam, which had got very dated. The previous Nolan trilogy, sorry, the Bourne films to date, certainly the Matt Damon ones, had been ever increasing shaky cam, and it had been a lot of various, serious people in suits in situation rooms, furrowed brow saying, "Get him." And films even the Bond film that had come out 6 months before is probably the goofiest of the Craig run. I mean, Spectre's not goofy, it's still a Craig Bond film, but it's the one that feels most like a traditional Bond film of his run. And I just thought...
most watching more of the...
Yeah, you can't really compare, because his run is something different, but I remember when we saw Spectre that we said, whatever you think of Spectre, he needed one a bit like this, because he'd done Casino Royale, which felt like a Bond film to me, and I love it, but it was shorn of a lot of traditional elements. You had Quantum of Solace, which was like a shaky cam revenge film. You had Skyfall, which was like a deconstruction of Bond that finished almost at the start line of his career, if you like. He's back in the office, he's ready to be Bond. And we didn't have this sort of mission with a larger-than-life Blofeld type. Whatever the end result, he needed one of his canon that you point to and go, well, that's what a Bond film's like. Not, this is deconstructing what a Bond film is like. So I did have this one worry that you're going to be back in a room, and it would be, again, the other thing I can liken it to is they brought 24 back a few years after it finished. It was struggling from about season 6 anyway. Season 6 was the writer's strike, and they changed direction.
Which one is this now? There was two ones. I can't remember. Now there was 24 where Jack Bauer's back.
I'm talking about Bauer. I'm not talking about the Legacy one with the Pfeiffer guy in it. I'm talking about Jack Bauer coming back. So you had 5 seasons of varying quality, but must-see television. It was the sort of thing people used to talk about at work. I know that's less so now because it's fragmented and streaming and we're all watching different things. But it got to season 5, which was the corrupt president, Gregory Itzin, who died last week, by the way. Gregory Itzin, so I feel safe to mention it because he died last week. Aged about 73. I saw it on Twitter. He's died within the last few days, Gregory Itzin. And then season 6, you had a writer's strikes, and the plot wasn't going anywhere, so they kind of changed their mind after 8 episodes in, and it was a disjointed mess. And then they tried to save it by relocating him. So season 7 was Washington, I think season 8, and that was the one with the person who's just played the Ball Queen in Picard. I've forgotten her name now, the redhead. And then he was in New York for a season, and it went away, and it had died, and it had had its time. It's all this, picking it up the phone and damn it, and send it to my PDA now. And it got very formulaic, and it ended up with Jack in rooms beating confessions out of people, and it had just served its time. And that post 9/11 era of even a portion of society believing the ends justify the means, we're keeping the world safe so waterboarding's all right or whatever, had passed. So they brought it back in London. I'm going a very long way round on this point, but they brought it back in London and did a 12 episode one. I think every episode was like 2 hours instead of an hour. It wasn't quite real time. And I was really excited for it. I was even tweeting about it. 24 starts again tonight. Brilliant. I put it on and I switched it off within 20 minutes. It was like the era of this has done. And it's not that it's even bad. It's just it belongs to another time and it's played out. So I think that was my worry going in. So I'll be very brief on first thoughts. My first thoughts are, it felt like Born Light. Alicia Vikander is not Joan Allen. I think she's a decent actress, but she's not Joan Allen. Tommy Lee Jones is just a bit of a cliche now of what we've seen before, because they've shown us the same type of leads to these organisations 3 or 4 times now, so it's lapsing into cliche. He's getting a bit.
How many people are there? Do you
Here's another program,
Yeah.
I just think how long are you going to keep chasing these Treadstone operatives? How long? Aaron Cross has been forgotten. Not necessarily a bad thing, to be fair. It undercuts this quantum of solace, this measure of comfort, this measure of a normal life we hoped he'd get, and he clearly hasn't. And then there was one small thing that I think I would have mentioned in the summer review of it. There's one shot in this film that just tells me that their heart's not in it the same way, and that Greengrass is now not as hands-on in finding out if the technology at least even makes sense, because they sharpen a picture at one point of Vikander's character, but they seem to sharpen it off 1 pixel to perfect. You know, the technology leaps are just getting more hand wavy, more like we'll just sharpen that picture. You know, it's like some of the worst seasons of Star Trek, where
enhanced
they just
kind of thing.
Yeah, enhanced. So I just remember just coming out going, I don't know what the point of that was, and I don't really know why they brought it back. And you know, again, the government conspiracy angle of it. You know, them funding this kind of Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg type. I was a bit baffled by it, and the end result is okay. I had a better time with it this time, and maybe we can go into more detail as we go through it. How did you guys find it?
Okay, I want to hear your opinion as a first watch.
Yeah, first time watch. Yeah, but Commodian site. I don't know. I just struggle a little bit with this one. I think I need to watch it again because, like, in terms of the action, for me it's probably one of the strongest of the series. But in terms of really short, really kind of a lot of story and character development is, you know, there could be so much more in terms of that rather than just, oh, it was his dad, you know, it was his father, he set it all up. Just seems kind of very paper thin. So, like, you know, there could be a lot more kind of like plot and, you know, try to tie this all in together in a very satisfactory way where it's kind of left very open-ended. Is there going to be a sequel? Will she chase him again at the end? You know, is there will we see a return of that other character? Lots of loose ends here that weren't really tied up. As I say, I would kind of agree a little bit, David. It's, the same with the last film. It's a little bit Bourne-like, even though you have Bourne and we haven't got that Baron Cross, whatever his name was, the other guy. It's a bit kind of like, I don't know, Bond by numbers, Bourne by numbers. You've got all the ingredients, but it doesn't kind of do anything new. But it's great to see.
Do you think that's the problem? I just want to ask a question about that, Becca. Do you think this film would have been better had it been the second or third film? Do you think it's that it's weaker, or do you think it's that we're just seeing the same thing yet again?
Yeah, same. It's kind of the same again, especially because we've had such a big gap as well between the last film as well. I think there was a video game in between. I can't remember when exactly it would have been released. Would have featured Matt Damon, but because the violent, you know, it was. I remember sort of reading reports on that at the time that it was the violence had to be toned down, because otherwise they would have, you know, worked together on the interim in that game. But he didn't, so they didn't. Which is a shame, but it's, you know, it's good to kind of see them together again, as it were. But yeah, I think it's because it is more of the same. I mean, the action scenes are great. I love that kind of, obviously shaking camera has been toned down, as now it's kind of not as new, it's not as novel as it was back in the day. Also, just to apologise, it's very hot here in England at the moment, so excuse me if I start to droop towards the end. I've got a fan.
I always apologise when I droop.
Well, this is it. Just as if you can hear anything, I've got a fan going in the background, so apologies for any sort of residual
It could be
noise.
Mine's going as well. It's really hot in here.
Yeah, it is quite warm. So, well, as high 20s, 30s is very warm for English summertime.
I was in Romania last week. It was 36 or 97, depending on where
they're
you're
a bit
from.
hardier there. They're used to it, in the hot countries. So
yeah, so I've been in extreme heat, but suddenly it's really hot and humid here. And
now you come back to England and go, it's a bit cooler.
The thing is, you come back from there, and you've got so used to the heat. I wouldn't say used to it. It was wearing me out by the last day.
Yeah, you
come back here, and you've acclimatised to the point that, like, it just doesn't feel hot. But like 10 days later, that acclimatisation's gone, and I am roasting here.
You acclimatise back to like English summertime. Oh dear. But yeah, I've got some water on the go, and I've got a fan going in the background, so I try not to wilt too much. Yeah, as I say, yeah, just to kind of answer your question, really. I mean, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Really great action scenes, and then the epic fight between Bourne and yes, like at the end is just literally, you feel every punch. Oh my god. But yeah, for me, it's kind of like it's the Quantum. But that's not to say like Quantum is a bad film. It's rising up, you know, people's expectations. There are Bond fans out there who think it's their favourite, not just of the Craig run, but the series. Well. But it's one of those things where it's a little bit kind of by numbers, and obviously there's kind of been a big gap, and it doesn't kind of tie everything up satisfactorily at the end. So it's kind of like obviously left it open for the sequel, which is fine. But strong performances. Alicia Vikander, I can't pronounce her name. It's fantastic. I'll watch whatever she's in. I've listened to her read the phone book. Really enjoyed her in Ex Machina. That was a fantastic film. Went to see that quite a few times. I thought Tommy Lee Jones was quite good. I mean, to be fair, he is a bit kind of typecast as kind of like grumbly, CIA agent pulling all the strings, not agent, but director pulling all the strings from the background. Eventually gets what's coming to him. It's fantastic.
It's kind of like casting. Sorry to interrupt, Becca.
No, you carry on.
No. But I just thought just chip in with with what you said with Tommy Lee Jones. It's kind of like casting Blofeld as what they did in Craig. What's his name? His name.
Christoph Waltz. Yeah, sort of phones it in.
Yeah. It's
he does sort of phone it in a little
it's
bit.
Perfect casting, and it's like.
Yeah, it's like he knows he's there just to do that one role, and it's like it's the role that he does so well.
Yeah,
but it's great to see him though. I didn't expect it because I sort of went into this film a little bit blind. I did a little bit of reading around it, but I sort of went in with like minimal knowledge to try and up the surprise factor. And I was like, ooh, but he delivers like quite meaty lines, with a quite a sort of really serious faces, very expressionless almost, which is very creepy. But like he'll use sort of like tone and inflection in his voice to sound like he's kind of sort of making a throwaway comment, or you think he's just sort of laughing something off, but actually he's very menacing. So obviously he's a legend director, incredibly talented. But I just kind of feel like here I was phoning it in ever so slightly. But Vincent Cassel's brilliant. French cinema is probably one of my weak spots, unfortunately, and I haven't seen him in anything for a long time. I think I've got Black Swan in my collection.
What's the 2-part French film I watched him in from years ago? Hang on a minute.
But I'm sure there's he's done loads since, and obviously appeared in.
No, I need to look up because I like French. Oh, La Haine.
No, La Haine wasn't 2-part, was it?
No, that wasn't La Haine. I'm thinking of something else. Hang on.
Massey or
Meereen.
Yeah.
Or spelt Mesrine. Yeah, Killer Instinct.
That was meant to be quite good, wasn't it? Definitely.
Yeah, it was 2 films, both really good.
He's brilliant in whatever he's in. I mean, my point is that the cast is fantastic, but it's just the fact that it's kind of more of the same really. And for me, it didn't tie everything up at the end. But the action scenes are brilliant. It's great, amazing location hopping. It's kind of everything you'd really want from a Bourne film. But yeah, just kind of more of the same after too long a gap. So kind of.
It's that gap, isn't it?
Me,
it's the gap. If this had come out,
that sounds really bad, but
yeah, if this had come out in 2010, maybe I'd be more kindly disposed. I still think it was diminishing returns, but
I mean, I'll probably see it again and be like, oh yes, it's the best of the series. But I mean, in terms of like the action, for example, and locations, but I just kind of feel like it's very action heavy, but it's at the expense of kind of story and plot, which could see a bit more development. But to be fair, this is the only one that Tiniguri wasn't involved in, and that's probably a bit better for it. I know that's really bad, but that's my controversial.
I just think as well, you're at the point where it's Treadstone again, and we're like 14 years on from the first film, and they're still sort of sifting through issues with that and trying to pick off agents from there. They've got a new wrinkle on it, but because it's been, like I say, a week, I'm having to look at a synopsis so I don't get confused with the third one in terms of what the plot setup is. Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. It's basically a film that came a bit too late, and it's past its time. That being said, I did enjoy its watch, but however, like the first time I watched it, I enjoyed it, but then never bothered to revisit it. I never fancied watching it since now.
And it's like The Godfather 3. It's a coda. It's a coda you can do without because it's not really part of the same self-contained story that 3 finished with.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a shame because there are things in it that are good, but I think that's kind of wavered down by like very much after the fact, and also because it's moved on from shaky cam and that kind of like that sort of world that in that sort of time we're not like in the mid 2000s now. It's kind of like sort of shifted into something a bit more conventional. So in a way, it almost like just sort of it comes like any other like action movie.
It's sort of become the norm now, hasn't it? Really, I mean, it's amazing that he sort of pioneered this technique, but now it's kind of got to the point where it's a bit past it.
You think about the Bourne films and what like made that kind of like stand out, had its own, forgive me, identity of its own. No pun intended.
It gave it supremacy.
Well, here's my ultimatum. It's ruined its legacy. Anyway, we've done that. It's kind of like Bourne had a bit more of a realistic edge. Now, like the opening scene is Bourne doing like underground boxing fights, which doesn't sound very Bourne-ish. Of like straight away, I'm like, I don't see that character ever doing that. It's like drawing to which day. But not only that, it's like we introduce him and he just decks the guy out in one punch. Now, I understand that might happen. Reality, like fights don't always end as long as they can do in movies. But the way that's done just seems like, yeah, I'm a tall hard ass. Like next time we see him, he's like he's getting beaten up by his guy, but it's almost like he's like, I'm just not even bothering. And it's like the moment he wants to end it, it's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll just deck him and it's done then. It just makes him a bit more like, like your Superman type sort of 80s action hero. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying I have a problem with that in itself, but that just seems like a complete tonal shift from what was before. And it's like it's almost like the movie's kind of like betrayed its roots just to kind of fit in with the current trend, or just because it kind of had to move on. You couldn't think of anything else.
It's dangerous that.
Be more.
I'll tell you the issue with that for me. The issue for it with me is trying to balance judging what we got against what we think we should get. It's like talking about The Dark Knight Rises again. I remember saying I have to be cognizant of the fact that this wasn't the Batman film I wanted. This wasn't where I wanted the character to go. So does that make it less valid? Has the filmmaker, quote unquote, got it wrong to take that character?
Because it didn't meet my personal expectations.
When I look at Jason Bourne, I think he'd largely dealt with whatever guilt he had in the first 3 films. So there's something very masochistic about being in this underground fighting scene that would almost feels like self-punishment. And I don't see that as where Bourne was emotionally at the end of the trilogy we've already seen with him. Secondly, realistically, no matter how good you are, if you're doing bare knuckle fighting the whole time, you're going to have pretty mashed up features, unless it's his first fight. Bit like Pretty Woman, where like she's a prostitute, but it's her first night on the street, she hasn't shagged anyone yet.
Yeah, he comes off of that looking pretty good. I kind of imagine, you'd obviously have like cuts and bruises and everything. I mean, earlier in the film, obviously, you see a massive bruise over his eye, but you think, oh, how has he recovered so quickly?
I saw, Bourne had
he just knocks everyone out first punch, it doesn't matter.
No, which is ridiculous, because no one would want to see him fight if it was one punch every time, would they? But in my head, Bourne having a good outcome in his life, because obviously there are various shades of bad or indifferent outcomes. No, I suppose the indifferent outcome would have been he feels he has to stay off the grid, so he wouldn't want his name appearing anywhere. He would basically be where John Connor was at the start of Terminator 3. He'd be working cash in hand in construction and things like that. That's how I saw him living in the indifferent way. The positive outcome would be regime change at the CIA, and he's no longer in any hit list, and he's left alone to live peacefully, and eventually he comes to understand, or at least believe, he doesn't have to be off the grid anymore. He can take any one of the passports he's got and just go, okay, I'm living as that person now safely. But I thought he would live off the grid. I thought he'd be doing something manual, just by nature of the fact that cash in hand jobs tend to be that. So he would be in some kind of manual labour, stroke construction, stroke something like that. I didn't see him doing bare knuckle fighting.
The other thing is, and I haven't heard anyone mention this, so forgive me if this has been mentioned like outside this podcast, but the idea of this being called Jason Bourne. Now I get with like the Bourne identity and whatnot. I mean, the Bourne was like what was like the main name he had as an undercover, but we know that's not his real name. So why is this like? Surely the title should be David Webb.
Well, you'd struggle to market that, to be fair, wouldn't you? You'd struggle to market that, to be fair. But I think also there's, again, I keep using the Batman parallels, but it's a bit like Batman's the real him. You know, they tried to tell him at the end of the film it would be, you really are sort of, you really are Jason Bourne. You can't deny your sort of thing. But I mean. Novels by Ludlum we've all been filled, but there was continuation novels by Eric van Lustbader, and there are 12 of them.
Wheat van, bread van.
I know. I'm thinking. I thought my mind went.
I've never read any of his books, but that's how I know him.
Episode 2, season 3, Red Dwarf, Marooned. Yes, brains went to the same place, but he's done 12. And the guy called Brian Freeman's come in and done 3, and then the ones after that are just Treadstone.
I need to check them out. I've read the Ludlum stories, of course, because they're so I need to read the others.
There are 15 titles out there that could, they were only loose fits to start with. You could have taken another one, but Bourne Legacy's been used. That was Eric van Lustbader. But you got Bourne Betrayal, the Bourne Sanction, the Bourne Deception, the Bourne Objective, Dominion, Imperative, Retribution, Ascendancy, Enigma, Initiative, Nemesis. The Nemesis was abandoned apparently. I am just Wikipediaing this, but Jason Bourne again.
Yeah, was quite popular, but I think at the time you had other films come out with a similar title.
I think we're starting to follow trends. I think that's the point. I think that had this developed into the Bond series, this is the sort of Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die era where it starts to be less confident that it's his own product. There aren't many like it, but how many films with working titles around this time were the character's name? In 2008 you had Rambo, but its working title was John Rambo. And there were others like that aren't coming to mind now, but there were several. And I just think like I think you're right, it's lost the thing that's made it unique. And they've got to sort of reinvent mental turmoil for him. I know he finished the last film injured, but he dealt with his guilt and grief over Marie, over the various murders he committed, over botched murders, even not because he didn't murder them, but because his life started going down this path because he lost his bottle doing a murder. So I thought he dealt with that. So you've got to go down the old father angle now, and it's just cooking up another mystery for him to solve, and that isn't what I expected.
And again, it's like, all right, so not only that, his dad was involved.
Never mentioned in 3 films.
And tried to protect him from this. It's all very like retconned, and you got like Tommy Lee Jones. Which, fair enough, decent catch, does a fairly decent job in the role, it's like he's good on screen,
Yeah,
but,
he never
again,
quite phones it in, does he?
Why is it not like David Stratham character or Scott Shepherd, generally speaking? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? If it's like the head guy, it should be that, sure.
It's almost like they want to reinvent it, but they've got nothing to reinvent it with. If you want to bring Bourne back, you've got to have him mentally unsure of a load of things again. And now he's got... Right, we didn't have his dad mentioned. Okay, he had amnesia. Maybe that bit of memory had come back. But, like, the central issue of trying to find Jason Bourne, hunt him down, member of Treadstone being questioned in Congress, etc., etc., and Richard Webb never gets mentioned. Bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Shall we discuss this film sequentially?
Okay, so let's start. So where do we start? We start...
Little recap.
It's a long film as well, 2.5 hours.
No, it isn't. It's just over 2. I think you've got film 4. You got all the adverts in it.
Well, exactly. This is. I was
2 hours and 3 minutes.
I was through all the breaks, and it was like 2 hours.
Yeah, the bit where they tried to sell me a Dyson every 20 minutes was crap.
From January, so a bit where they tried to
And
advertise.
apparently, he wants us to go to the DFS sale. Yeah, all right.
No, I was through. Yeah, and it's about 2 hours. So.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think I can't remember what I said. Legacy was now. It's longer than the 3 Matt Damon films we've had to date. Though, I think. Yeah, this is
certainly one of the longest for sure.
Yeah, this is. He's hiding out. I mean, we got a recap. We get all the flashbacks of his training.
Yeah, it's a bit kind of like, especially with these films, especially because there's been a big gap in between. It's like previously on Bourne,
Yeah, I think we'll just go straight to Greece. He's in Greece. He's been there for a number of years, and he's just basically doing, bare knuckle fighting to make a living. And the one fight we see him have, he just knocks him straight out. When I said the film's gonna follow trends from now on, what I was actually thinking about was this hacktivist angle. The whole anonymous thing. It's like you've come back to say something new. You've missed the first wave of Anonymous and stuff like that. And it is that the way the bomb producers say, well, the first thing we do is what's happening in the world today. You can argue we've had plenty to say over time. It's an approach. It's a sort of a valid approach. The problem is, by the time film comes out, it tends to be a bit old hat. But yeah, Nicky Parsons is now basically a hacker. Julia Stiles' character. Unless we want to say any more about Grease. But there isn't much.
I'm really surprised that she got killed off. So I was kind of thinking, hopefully if they do, spoiler alert for a film that's quite a few years old now.
It just seems like another rehack of what happened in the second film. It's
it's a bit of a rehash,
excuse to get him back in the field, get him on the. So she's become a bit of
she's working with a version of Anonymous. She's living in Iceland. Don't know why, but she's in Iceland.
Off the grid.
Off the grid.
Yeah,
and they get into sort of Treadstone files and find out information about Bourne and his father. And the salient point at this time is that they were monitoring Bourne, previously David Webb, before he volunteered. And we don't see it all at this stage, but she sees it all and burns the evidence. But of course, the hack is kind of traced. And Heather Lee, the Alicia Vikander character, sort of sees what's going on and sees what they're seeing. So CIA centrally now know what is known, which is Jason Bourne was more to the CIA than even he realised. Is that a fair summary?
Pretty much, yeah. So basically, they've got Jason Bourne back in play. Then you find out that it's Nicky as well.
I don't know. I really don't.
It's pretty soon the way they kind of figure out. So, yes, we're introduced to Heather Lee, who is Alicia Vikander, doing a really bad American accent. It doesn't quite get there.
I was trying to sort of place it. I mean, I obviously can't do one myself, but obviously she's international background. But I don't know, she kind of did okay. But yeah, we'll
Where's Alicia Vikander from?
Okay. Sweden, isn't she?
She's Swedish. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It just kind of wander a little bit, but it's fairly solid. So.
Yeah. I mean, she's definitely got presence as well. But again, it's almost like the what I said last week with Rachel Weisz is like, well, if you cast Rachel Weisz, why don't you just have her British? There's no reason why she can't be British.
It's a bit strange, isn't it? But I think she's definitely magnetic.
Well, hang on a minute. I've only got one caveat to that. I'm married to a Romanian. She couldn't work for MI5 or MI6, not without an American, not without a British passport.
I think that's what I meant. So why don't you just cast American? I know, she's popular, but then surely you'd cast her the part, though, shouldn't you?
Or you've got to explain she's naturalised American. It's as simple as that. I think for some of them you have to be British born.
Yeah, you kind of do like they do with Van Damme and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, grown up in Brussels, or or I'm Canadian.
I don't understand this. They were obviously.
If you've got a Swedish character, they'll cast an English actor or an American actor and do an accent.
You got to imagine Paul Greengrass is a sort of at the apex of casting. I know they have casting people, but by and large, if you have power as a director, which he will have, they'll have tried to been teasing him back for a decade for this. he's not just for hire. His opinion would be respected. You got to say he's probably the final say on casting, and he's not American either, so he may not have noticed the accent's a bit shit.
It's probably like us thinking like, well, the better job than I would do. So
Yeah.
Well, this is it, better job than I would do as well. So.
And of course, she's now married to like Fassbender, isn't she? So he's gone, how do you do an American accent, Michael? And he's gone, like my Murphys, I'm not bitter.
Well, she's very lucky.
If you ever go back and watch X-Men First Class, about halfway through the film, he just lapses into Irish and doesn't come back out of it.
Like he's gone, fuck it.
He's very good at, he's one of these sort of chameleon type actors. He can kind of do most things, most accents. But there's another one just kind of wander around the world.
Well, I saw Thor: Love and Thunder last night, and honestly, you got Russell Crowe playing Zeus, and it reminded me of in Robin Hood all those years ago, where his voice went through Ireland and Yorkshire and fucking Newcastle and everything.
He went everywhere.
I thought that, but I was just thinking like that Harry Hill character, the kebab shop owner.
It reminded me of Hello Hello with What a Mistake to Maker, right? He's meant Zeus. I'm presuming because it's a Greek god that was meant to be Greek, but he kept lapsing into Italian, and I was brought up by an Italian, so I thought, why is Zeus Italian? And then my wife said to me, it's Greek, it's a Greek accent. I said, it isn't purely a Greek accent, I can promise you, because some of that is...
Yeah, he does travel around.
Some of that's Italian. Travels all over the place. But yeah, so at this stage, Heather Lee seems I don't know what her sort of rank is. She's certainly to do with sort of...
Yeah, she's like cybersecurity kind of like...
Okay. But she seems like a decent, honest professional at this stage. And you could even argue by film's end she is. She's just ambitious and could be just saying what her superiors want to hear. But we'll discuss that near the end of the film. But she basically goes to Dewey. The only way I can remember him is Dewey lost the election to the guy who succeeded FDR in America. Truman. Yeah, Dewey. Yeah. That's the only way I can remember his name. And says, they say, well, this has got to be Bourne. Bourne's been in this file, and they're worried that it's going to jeopardise their latest program, because every film has to have a new fucking program, Iron Hand, and so they start in process
and it's like Treadstone but on steroids,
Yeah. You never get a kinder, gentler Treadstone, do you? This is like Treadstone, but we'll let them play with a puppy before we kill them. So he gets out another sort of agent, Vince Cassell's character, and as it happens quite a lot in this series, we never get a name for him. There seems to be some sort of personal grudge because Bourne left the program, and it led to a series. This is why I get it confused with the end of the third film and the start of Legacy, that it kind of started this process of everything coming out publicly, which is why Aaron Cross was being hunted and everything else, and they sort of blend into one. But it's now like go kill Bourne, because he exposed us once, and he's into all this again, and it's partly self-preservation because what we will later find out happened with his father, Bourne's father, of course. Nicky goes to find Bourne because he works out that's where he is. Can't remember how. And I think this is the film's first action sequence, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it just again felt a bit... It was alright, I've seen it all before. It's another chase. He's trying to keep Nicky safe, but again, if you've ever seen a film and you look at your watch, how far into the film we are, I think Nicky's going to die here. And I think I thought that on first viewing.
Yeah, I thought that too. I was like, I wasn't surprised by it at all.
If she was a new hacktivist who went to find him, someone we'd not met, no, she wouldn't die here. But because it's Nicky, she's been brought back as a sacrificial lamb.
It's like history repeating itself kind of thing. You kind of think, this is the same. Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt the same. Even though it's all relatively well done, I thought the action's really good.
Yeah.
But
But she tosses Bourne like is it a locker key or something? I can't remember now. And once again he's left regretting the woman he couldn't save, and it's like, we've seen this. The film doesn't even do the courtesy of reminding us that these two used to be something of a romantic item. For anyone watching Jason Bourne as their first film, they got the flashback.
Well,
but you didn't get.
Bourne himself doesn't seem to give a shit. So.
You don't get much of why she meant anything to him, except they've got some professional history, you know. And I'm sure you've had work colleagues that if they passed away, you'd be really upset, but like. Wouldn't be life defining to you. You wouldn't carry guilt. It was like, oh, I really like them. That's how terrible. And it's not sold as anything more than that. In the meantime, it's
personal now.
Personal now. Oh, Harry Enfield's television program is now on. I think is it Netflix or BritBox? It's on one of them.
It's on Netflix.
So you can actually watch that in a slightly better picture quality than the version on YouTube.
Do check it out, it's hilarious. I can't recommend it highly enough.
I was just sending you photos of it the other day, like, look what I'm watching!
Yeah, literally, oh my god. It's kind of, you know, if you're a fan of British comedy, do check it out. But a little bit now slightly off colour, but hilarious nonetheless.
There is something very derivative about this film, because we've gone straight for the hacktivist theme, and now we're going straight to the sort of social media program type theme. Bear in mind, what year was the social network? I mean, we know Facebook was like 2007 in wide use.
Social network was 2012, wasn't it? Or
wasn't
around
it?
That time?
Wasn't it 10 or 12? It was 10 or 12, one of the two. We're a few years after that now. I don't know when the Steve Jobs film came out, but whatever the case, this doesn't feel very fresh, does it?
Yeah, 2010. You're right. Sorry.
Okay, this doesn't. I thought, yeah, because Facebook got big very quickly then, because we'd all had our Facebook accounts about only 3 years by that point. It's not that long. Okay, so we're straight into this social media angle, Riz Ahmed's character, and this is to do with. I don't even know what the program is. I think it combines a lot of different things. I think the idea is almost like a single sign-on for lots of things you want to do, but it does mean different things sharing privacy, which the film hand waves away. It has him raise the issue. You know, all these guys, Steve Jobs, Zuckerberg, all of them, they stand on stage with a microphone on and they just stroll the stage talking about their product. It's one of those, and he actually raises the issue of security. He says people say this could be a security issue, and he goes, no, I'm committed to it not being. And you go, well, that's all right then, I'm convinced. Thanks.
Well, that's it.
People worry about security, I tell them don't. Like, thanks.
I've said no. Well, that's fine then.
Well, that's assuaged all my worries. So the film brings it up just to wave it away, but after this we find him. He meets with Dewey, and they're using it for surveillance purposes.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if don't we get more detail later that they're talking about preemptive strikes on people, or have I got this confused with the Winter Soldier or something?
Well, I think it's because I think with when it comes to this new Iron Hand, it's just like they can use that to target people, and apparently with this Iron Hand, it's like gives them clearance to like target civilians if need be. So it's just like it's completely.
So it's ever more pervasive. So
like,
again, we're talking about privacy and all that, which we did, but again, that's. I'm not saying it's no longer a relevant topic. Of course it is. The number of extra sort of online presence grows all the time. I understand that it's still an issue, but it's not quite the hot button Hollywood issue that it was post 9/11, when you had things like the Patriot Act passed in America and things like that, and these preemptive sort of. You know, arresting even in Britain, when there was the big debate about arresting suspects and keeping them for 42 days, and so on, which didn't get through. It just feels it's interesting, like, but it's not fresh.
I was going to say it's one part of the film. I thought, oh, that's an interesting, like, sort of, all right, you kind of updated yourself a bit there, you know, especially in terms of like social media, what that means to like the broad public, because everyone's got one, you know, and the idea of everything basically being hacked and like you're being listened to and things like that, you know, it's there was that kind of that element which I thought, oh, that's not too bad. And we do get mentioned that he actually was funded from the start by the CIA. He got a leg up essentially.
Yeah.
So he took their money to begin with to become successful.
And
so
now he's not comfortable. He's on the verge of like repentance, really. Bourne, on the meantime, is going to Berlin, and he meets the lead hacktivist, basically, and he's going to view the files. And it's something to do with the fact that it triggers a memory. We think all his memories are back, but the film, we're told all his memories are back. We've been told that, but now, because they want another adventure, they have to dream up another memory he's forgotten. And this is now.
My dad. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot my dad was blown up on a cafe on the street in a cafe. He obviously met his dad. I don't know when this is meant to be because they don't really de-age Matt Damon very much for the flashback sequences. He looks older there than he did in the Bourne Identity, for example. So I'm not sure when it's meant to be, but it is meant to be before he was hired. So I don't know if they just didn't do enough to de-age him, or the TV screens. I mean, there's a waxiness to his face. They've done something. It's got a waxy finish to it. So it doesn't look good, but it doesn't look terrible. It's not immersion breaking. But basically, he's at like a cafe with his father on the sort of street, outside tables. His father goes to the car after telling him, I've done something terrible, but doesn't say what. And the car blows up. And Jason has always been told, and we'll just keep calling him Jason because that's how he's known now. Jason's always told that it was terrorists that did it. And what the files tell him is that... Do the files tell him the full story? Do the files tell him that it wasn't terrorists? Or do we find that out later?
I don't know, I'd have to rewatch it.
Okay, but at this point he knows that there's something about the CIA keeping an eye on him around the time his father died. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So Heather, this Vikander character, wants to speak to Bourne, and she wants to bring him in. Dewey just wants him dead. And then I think we go to London.
Da, 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 da. Yeah. He has a fight with the hacker guy as well.
Yeah.
There is that. But
that is a completely pointless fight, but he gets away anyway. Just before the sort of CIA get him there, because obviously they know exactly where he is now. All this hacking stuff was traced, so they can figure out where he was or where he's going. So, what he learns when he goes to London, this is it. He finds out the truth that he was under surveillance, and that his father wanted to abandon Treadstone because it wasn't what he officially wanted it to be. It wasn't what he designed. None of this makes sense to me, because what you've got is effectively a very senior man designing something, and later on we find they kind of want him out of the way and replace him with the son, but the son is just an agent. It's something different. The son's a killer. That's not what the designer of Treadstone necessarily was. But it turns out Richard was killed, and then he was killed because they were worried that he would go rogue on them, Richard, because he set up Treadstone and now finds it unethical, because it's basically just assassinations, including of, as we know from the first couple of films, world leaders, which is just not legal in any way. And then they set it up to look like a terrorist to give Bourne an incentive to join. That's tenuous.
Yeah.
Don't you think? It's not foolproof, is it? If you've determined to make him join.
I mean, look, it's fine if this was like the opening story for a new character, but given the fact that we've had like 3 movies and this has just been completely dropped out of nowhere, it's just a bit.
It's convenient.
Really? It's
convenient, and it's a stretch. That you're following this kid in inverted commas, because again, if this is not long before the Bourne Identity, presumably he's like mid-20s or something. But whatever age he is, he's a man. But relative to his father, obviously a kid you're following, and you want him to join, so you think, I'll kill his dad. We got to kill his dad anyway. But if we stage it a certain way, we'll get the son. And it's like, That's not foolproof as a plan. It could have the opposite effect. What's my father involved with? He was in the CIA. He knows his father's in the CIA. He's now been murdered. Could have.
My dad's dead. I don't really want to do anything.
I don't want any. I'll go and work in a fucking bank. You know, it's like, why? It doesn't follow he'd want anything to do with this.
I'll take off for a year. I'll just stay at home with PTSD. You know, like kind of.
Yeah. But in the interim, I mean, he has to threaten this guy, this Treadstone guy, to get that information. He's hanging him from a roof. You know, what a helpful chap.
Yeah.
And eventually, kind of, obviously, Vincent Cassel's there and kills him, and Bourne gets away. Becca, what did you make of it so far?
Yeah, what a helpful show. The opening action scene, I think I'm a bit on kind of two minds. I do really enjoy it, but also I think it does kind of go on and on and on and on and on and on. It could do with being a bit shorter and just getting on a little bit. I think that was probably like one of my biggest bugbears of this film. I mean, there's obviously, like, over the years, Bourne has become sort of known, obviously the same as Bond as well, and Mission Impossible, and all those kind of spy series that kind of originated sort of in the 60s as well, and that sort of time, is known for sort of, you know, globe hopping and many different sort of global locations. But I kind of think that here it's been kind of, you know, forward in terms of action, in terms of plot, really. I mean, it's a really good opening scene, but I just kind of feel it goes on like a little bit too long. So yeah, needs a bit chopping down a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think what I do need to do is probably, you know, watch the film again, but obviously not the film version. That's probably edited for television.
It is better on a second watch, and those two watches in my case.
I just liked it. I really did enjoy it. I mean, for me, kind of the action scenes were a little bit kind of going on a bit too long, and then sort of to see him, you know, as the sort of bare knuckle, you know, boxer or MMA fighter or whatever, it was a little bit like, okay, a little bit Fight Club, you know.
Do you know why I think the action drags on? And I think it's because the story just hasn't done enough. I think it's because the story hasn't done enough to convince us it needs to exist. So the action will end up feeling like busy work, won't it?
Exactly. I mean, that's why I kind of felt like it was, you know, it was a really good action scene. Reminded me a lot of the Marrakesh chase, you know, in the previous film. But at the same time, I just kind of felt like it just needed to kind of wind on a little bit, you know. But the biggest shock for me was obviously Julia Stiles. I was thinking, oh no, you know, like she's going to come back for the sequel, you know.
I think the biggest thing I've missed in the whole London sequence is that this is where Heather and Dewey start to diverge, because she's given the go-ahead to get two teams in there, like an Alpha and Beta team, to capture Bourne and the asset, and at the same time Dewey is surreptitiously running the asset to kill them.
I thought that was really clever though. It's really interesting how she's being played.
Her team's going down under Dewey's orders, and Dewey's going, "God, you got to get your shit together here," and it's him causing the problem. Yeah, I think Heather works this out, and that's why she finds Bourne, and here her motivations start to become ambiguous. That she's definitely, at this point, she's going to help him get into Las Vegas, where this convention of Deep Dream or whatever it's called is.
But she's also quite ambitious as well. Like
that's
she's obviously gunning for the top job.
She's doing the right things. We find out towards the end of the film she's doing the right thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
That she definitely.
So it makes me kind of wonder if there is a sequel, it might be about her.
Well, I think Dewey's definitely. She definitely finds Dewey deeply unethical. But I think if she...
But she wants to stay on his good side.
But she'd like his job as well.
Yeah.
But the point is, they're going to go to Las Vegas now because of Riz Ahmed and the whole social media thing. What she doesn't realise at this point, I think... she's pretty much told on the way they're going to kill him. Because he's threatening to down tools and he doesn't want anything to do with it. And he might be telling, you know, he's arrested and everything else. There's this... They're putting heat on this social media baron because he's threatening not to cooperate with the CIA, and it will either end in prison or death. And as they go to Las Vegas, she realises it's going to be death, and she realises that Bourne will take out Dewey, finding out what's going on, so she helps him get into America.
Yeah, she decides to kind of switch sides almost. But I kind of thought like the ending part was a little bit like... dare I say it, Living Daylights / Mission Impossible, you know, kind of a big sort of ending on a stage where somebody's going to be assassinated. So it's kind of like blending all these.
Well, I thought about it when he shot the lights out. When he shot the light out, I thought directly of
yeah,
Living Daylights.
it was a little bit.
Yeah.
Or like the opera scene.
So it's
movie.
Deep Dream, and Dewey is going to be like the main guest with this Kalur because
he's going to do a debate, isn't he? And that was another thing I thought. I can't see Dewey, Tommy Lee Jones' character, like going on stage doing a debate.
No, I can't.
He doesn't strike me as like I want that kind of attention.
And he wouldn't want to argue the rights and wrongs. He wouldn't want to argue the rights and wrongs of freedom versus surveillance and things like that.
He'd have some lucky do it, like someone else that would be like, you know, do you know what I mean? If it was like, oh, well, some other person from the CIA.
And if indeed he wants him murdered, why would he want to be anywhere near that stage?
Yeah.
It's just convenient to get him in the same city as Bourne. They haven't thought this through as well as they could have.
I mean, it's fine, but I just don't see. It just struck me as like I won't buy that as something he'd do. And again, he's never on stage as well because he puts Alicia Vikander character in there, and it's like because he's there when he's talking to the asset. He says like put one on my shoulder so it looks like believable that we're both targets. But instead he just puts Alicia Vikander's on there, and then kind of like thinks, "Oh, hang on, just kill them both."
Yeah.
And then instantly thought, "Why isn't that the plan to begin with? Right."
Well, either it's the plan to be. If it had been the plan to begin with, we'd buy it. But because it wasn't the plan to begin with, it just looks like the film's lurching into him being a comedy villain at this point.
Yeah.
The point is, Bourne gets wind of what's...
Because he doesn't have to, like, suspect her of helping Bourne at this point. He's just like, oh, she's a pain in the arse, just fuck her. Just, like, you know, she's already pissed me off. Just take her out.
But it works less well as a change of plan halfway through, even though he might start suspecting by then. It's still like he's just becoming a comedy villain now. But, I mean, effectively, Bourne intervenes to stop the asset shooting Kalur fatally. He sort of turns a light on him, Living Daylight style, and it just makes him shoot, but not miss, but catch him in the shoulder. And then he sort of moves on to find Dewey and confront him. And, basically, Dewey ends up getting the upper hand on Bourne, which I don't really understand either. He's about to shoot him, and then Heather arrives and shoots Dewey. I can't remember how that happens.
So Dewey's like right-hand man. He's like...
I like him working his way... Sorry, I will just add, I like Bourne working his way through the building unfound to get to that room. He does quite well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's quite smart. You kind of see...
The idea of him as a bit of a shadow, as assassins would be, is great. I love that. But sorry, Chris, you were about to explain...
Yeah, so he's got like a right-hand man and he came in and
it distracted him, did it?
Yeah, so they shoot. I think Bourne gets shot, but it kills the other guy. But then Dewey like sort of pulls a gun on him, but Bourne's already like he already took a hit, and then Alicia Vikander just walks in and shoots him.
Yeah, and then I think she says something like. I think she tries to distract, talking about her going after the asset, unless I'm getting my films confused here. And he goes and hijacks a police van, and Bourne sort of steals was it a police car or a taxi? I can't remember now.
And it's here where I have like little like illusions of like what the third Timothy Dalton movie would have been like. There's a scene in Vegas where they chase on the Vegas Strip.
Yeah.
In a
Well, you've read that very recently, haven't you? The Lost Adventures of Bob.
Well, I remember reading it in that.
But it's got a full description of all that. Yeah, some kind of hero does it.
And I just sort of read that. It's like it's basically like a chase on the strip on a monster truck, isn't it?
Yes.
I instantly thought like it's probably something similar to like with the tank chase in GoldenEye.
That would have either been amazing or really tacky.
Like and I could just sort of see that very early 90s monster truck Vegas Strip. Timothy Dalton Bond, and I'm like, yeah, I can vision it. I can kind of, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm like, oh, I'm so good we didn't see that.
I didn't think
I can just vision it, you know. But yeah,
I didn't think it helped my image and early reactions to this film. the way that this chase went so late in the film, because everything about it should be thrilling me. Very few of these chases have been at night, so it's aesthetically different. The vehicles are different. It's on the Strip, so it's a very different location. It's been very Eastern European, and I know New York, but New York's not a bright city. It's, you know, in the same way, you know, it could be. It's not like driving around in LA or Las Vegas or something like that. So I thought that I just remember coming out of the film and thinking I should have loved that car chase, and I was bored. And I thought, because it was so close to the end of the film, I thought, yeah, they didn't need to make another Bourne film. This chase coming up, which I enjoyed more this time, it is well done, but because it didn't thrill me as much as it should had, it told me I was not that engaged with the film, and hence only minutes later I walked out going, yeah, that was disappointing. What did you think of this car chase, you guys?
Again, I think it sort of sums up the movie in itself, in that, like, on paper and on looking at it, it looks very impressive. I mean, there's this huge, like, massive amount of destruction going on. But yeah, there's something about it which I kind of check out of it.
Yes.
And I can't put my finger on why that is exactly, because, you know, because everything I see, I like think, well, this ticks all the boxes, but there's just something missing. It might be just that the story hasn't grabbed me the way it should to begin with. But yeah, that's kind of where it is. It's like, well, you know, it kind of sums up the film in general. It's like everything's all done up to a decent standard, but I just don't care enough.
We've sort of seen it all before, and this film was somewhat perfunctory in the way it got Bourne back anyway. Quite aside from the fact that I do return to this point, but if you start a film with Jason Bourne 10 years old on, still living that sort of lifestyle, what are we trying to save him for? His life's fucking miserable. You know what I mean? It's like, well, if you're never going to give him even the suggestion of some kind of peace, you might as well shoot him at the end of this. What difference does it make? Whether he will now find any peace with yet another head of the CIA gone, I don't know, but it's unlikely, because we have this, and he ends up killing the assets, you know, by breaking his neck and stuff. But just moving forward from that, you know, the social media guy, you know, continues that he's going to leak everything, so confusing hacktivism with social media there, but fine. But she meets with the deputy director back in Washington, explains it all, and kind of talks herself into being promoted. And she says that, I think I can bring Bourne in, which is a perfectly laudable objective, and he's got some trust with her. And then she says, she'll, you know, I think, and then he says, well, what if he won't? And he says, well, he'll have to be put down. So then she, you know, he finds her in a park, and they talk. She asks him to come back. That's where he belongs. And he says, I'll think about it. And then when she goes back to her car, because she's been picked up from her car by the deputy director to be taken there, there's a tape there that plays a recording of him following her with all her dialogue about putting him down. And she realises the currency that's about to get her promoted has now disappeared. She's got no chance with him, and she's been rumbled. And that's it. And he walks away. And I think,
extreme ways.
But to what? To what is he walking away? Because she's either going to be promoted, in which case she's just threatened his life, albeit she didn't immediately think he'd hear that, or the deputy director is a bit shady. You know, the guy she met with is a bit shady too. So there's no promise of any peace here. He's going to still be on the run again. So I just think you've brought him back for a reasonably underwhelming adventure to make up some new horse shit about his memory, in order to end with him back on the run, when you left him at the end of the previous film with some hope that he'd go somewhere, you know, a bit like the Shawshank Redemption, somewhere warm with no memory. And actually he was street fighting. And it's like, well, what out there is going to be any better than that? So I just kind of just finished the film really disappointed with it, and that's I'm going to sort of curtail my final thoughts there, because they are my final thoughts. I've just said it. Perfunctory, well done in and of itself, but because it's the fourth Matt Damon entry, seen it all before, and you're still mulling over Treadstone like 14 years later, it's just it either should have been much more than this after 9 years, or they shouldn't have bothered. But it's better than the Bourne Legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots to like, definitely. But I just kind of feel like it's a bit like too much time has passed. I mean, it's great to see kind of Damon and Greengrass, the Ultimate Dream Team. But yeah, too much time has passed. All the techniques you use have now become de facto. They've become de rigueur, and now become other buzzwords. They've now kind of inserted themselves into like the Bond parlors of filmmaking, really. Not as innovative anymore, unfortunately. Although we're glad that they were and that they did, and cinema's moved on because of it. Yeah, I'll just do my final thoughts now. 3 out of 5. I kind of feel like I said at the top of the show, it's more like the sort of the quantum of the Bourne series, but I kind of feel like that's tarring it with the same brush, which is really not what I mean. I'll probably need to watch it again, and I'll come out raving and be like, yes, oh my god, amazing, best Bourne film ever. I mean, I enjoyed it in terms of the action. The opening action scene, the chase scene is probably a little bit too long. But I kind of feel like with Bourne, the character really hasn't sort of moved on, I guess. The performances are really good. Vikander is, she's played by both sides. And I kind of get the feeling that if they're going to pick it up, the next one might be about her, or if she survives. But I kind of felt like Tommy Lee Jones is fantastic as always, but he's played that role before. I mean, he still does it really well. Still menacing, still quite threatening in the background, pulling all the strings. And then when he finally meets his maker at the end, he just feels like just has been calmed down. But then that epic fight between Bourne and Vince Cassell's character, the Asset, is sort of vicious and bloody, but how he walks away from it with seemingly no bruises is a miracle performed only by the film's makeup team. But it's really sort of vicious and brutal fight that you feel every punch of. It did kind of feel to me a little bit derivative. Great to see some Vegas locations as well. I think the Riviera Hotel was actually closed at the time, but they managed to kind of get it open again, and obviously I turned on all their lights, especially for that scene where he kind of plows in through the entrance in the SWAT car. Great location hopping, definitely. Great performances, but just too much time passed between this and the last film. More of the same. Doesn't kind of really add anything, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, there's not much more I can really say, because I think I've said it all. The only thing I'll leave is really with a question. Do you think maybe if you're going to come back with Bourne, maybe you should have left it a few more years? So it's like, you get the hunger back again. It's like, oh, Bourne's back. Maybe give it like a 10-year wait. 10, 15.
Oh, what? From I don't know. What are you asking? Because they left it 9 years.
Rather than come back like when it did, if they waited longer to come back, you think like the return would have been more like had more of an impact.
I think I don't know when we're talking from, because if you think about,
I was talking like from like say the Legacy or Ultimatum or whatever.
See, from Legacy you may have a point, but I just think that it's difficult to say, because the problem is the topic. If you're going to still be banging on about Treadstone, then in some respects 9 years is almost too long, because you waited a decade, everyone's expectations went up, and we come back and you're still talking about Bourne's past and his parents and fucking Treadstone and everything else. I'm not sure that 20 years would have made any difference. The only thing it might have done is actually prompted them to forget about Treadstone and find some other reason they've got to get on Bourne's tail 20 years later. Difficult to say, to be honest with you. I don't know that would have made an awful lot of difference, but who knows? I think my biggest problem is they didn't have another film here. They really didn't. They didn't have another film to tell, and that's really tough after so many years. After so many years, they've got to have a great idea for it to bother with it, you know? I don't think it being 9 years was in and of itself the problem, except it raised expectations, and when you found out they were still talking about the same old shit, it was like, really? But
I think they're probably lured in by the social media element. They're like, oh well,
we've got something we can say about that. That's not a bad thing necessarily. I don't hate it. It's just the fourth go round, and like I say, it's so many years later that you just think that they've got to have a great idea to do this, and they didn't. I'm being too harsh on it. I had a better time with it than for example, I'm hearing Becca had. I had a better time with it than I had the first time I ever saw it, and it's fine. But at the end, we've got this crunching great car chase that I just think I've seen it before. And my wife watched it with me, and she said, I'm not that into car chases. And I said, some of them are brilliant, though. I said, it's because you're not that into this film. And that's just an opinion. I'm not telling her she's wrong, but I was like, I think you just weren't that into this film, and so this car chase isn't grabbing you.
It did go on and on and on, though. I think it's just, I mean, it was a great chase, and I think it's one of those, you know, it does carry on in the tradition of those great action films, where a lot of it is done very, very minimal CGI. A lot of cars got trashed in the making of that scene. Actually, talking about the CGI, there's one scene that I didn't think really held up. It was probably my TV, I'm not quite sure. But there's a scene where he's in London, and he basically he falls like from a great height, but he tries to grab hold of a cable or something, and doesn't, and ends up kind of falling from a great height. And I felt that was a little bit, even though it was 2016, 2017. Again, I haven't got like a massive 50-inch TV or whatever, so I haven't got motion smoothing or whatever, so I haven't really got to worry about that. You don't want motion smoothing? No, I don't. That's what you turn it off. Yeah. If you do have it, you turn it off. There's a massive great fly in my room. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I just kind of felt that's probably one scene where obviously they did try to use a little bit of CGI perhaps, and it looked a little bit ropey, dare I say. But yeah, I kind of feel like, I mean, the stunts and the action scenes were, you know, I think for me kind of like the best in the series, but just like that scene in particular, and the opening sort of chase could have chopped a little bit out perhaps.
Absolutely. I don't know. Anybody got anything to add?
No, because I to be honest, don't know too much.
That could be it, Chris. Let's see if knowledge changes our perspective. Becca?
Probably not now. I'm struggling to find fun facts about this film. Just go ahead, sorry.
You mean you can't you find plenty of facts but they're not fun?
No, they are quite boring facts. I mean, nobody died in the making of this film. Let's have a little look. Let's scrape the barrel. Scrape away. That barrel. Yeah, I'll just read the top one off IMDb. Las Vegas car chase sequence took 5 weeks to shoot, and around 170 cars by the end of it. So, ouch. Then I've only got 3 other fun facts. So, when we come to the next series, that's bounty laden with fun facts. So I'm sure I shall have my pick. So obviously, Adam had made The Martian in 2015 and won a whole raft of awards. So he collected his Golden Globe for that, and then he literally, I think, sort of a day later, he jetted off to Vegas to kind of shoot that tail end of the film.
Okay.
So he's like, thanks for this award, off you go to make Bourne. And also the cast was obviously made up of 3 Oscar winners, Damon, Jones and Becca have all won Oscars. Doggo wants an Oscar as well. Obviously this is the first and only Bourne film not to have Tony Gilroy involved, and I think it's probably the better for it. And then my final fun fact is obviously they wanted to film it in Greece. Obviously part of the film is set in Greece, but obviously due to Brexit, various bureaucracy and it obviously being very expensive, Tenerife actually doubles for Greece, so that is my fun fact. Not very fun, not very factual.
Well, I must admit, fun facts are normally superb, but
Brexit had that early impact on it
before the vote.
Well, I was going to say, but I think that was a while ago now, wasn't it? As well, because obviously
it was that year.
Over here in 2016, obviously we had the Brexit vote.
Surely
think
we'd
due to-
finish filming that by then. Surely.
Obviously, yeah, this is it. But obviously, due to Greece leaving, I think it just kind of things sort of rumbled on and on and on. But I think for an international production, it probably had nothing to do with it. But I would like to assume it did. But I just imagine it's one of those things where it's a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, just proved too expensive, and there are probably tax breaks to film on Tenerife. Nice holiday in the Canaries instead.
Oh yeah.
Join us next week for an examination of how Brexit ruined the man who knew too much.
You'd be surprised how.
We want to film at the Albert Hall, yeah, but what if they vote to leave the thing that's only just forming in 60 years' time?
Well, it very nearly closed down over lockdown. Obviously because it wasn't used at all, and it's kind of falling into disrepair, and it very nearly shut down along with many other sort of entertainment halls and venues and theatres, for example. So during lockdown it was actually at risk. So
anyway, that is our Bourne series done. Another one.
I hope you've enjoyed it more than we have.
Our next series will be all the westerns. By all the westerns, of course, we mean 5 of them. Sergio Leone's. We are doing we're doing the Dollars trilogy, so we're doing A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Then we go to his absolute masterpiece, Once Upon a Time in the West, and then we finish with A Fistful of Dynamite, which is also known as Duck You Sucker, which I haven't actually seen. That'll be a first watch for me. So we'll be covering those. But between series, we normally do a Bond commentary, and it's been a very, very, very long time since we have. So should we do another one?
Yeah, go on.
Alright. I don't know whose pick it is, though.
I can't actually remember.
Literally, it skipped my brain.
What's the last one we did?
I think the last one we did was when Connery died, though, so that would be Dr. No, which would have been a me choice to be fair.
So it's been a while, hasn't it?
It has. So we're going to do a Bond commentary. So Becca will tell you what that is in a minute, because I think it's her choice, because the last one was my choice, because it was around the time Sean Connery passed. And so the one thing is, it's definitely not my choice, so let's just say ladies first. As for social media, you can find me at thepastykid1976 on Twitter.
You can find me at cinetronics.co.uk. You can find all the old episodes on Podbean.
Yes, you can find us on social media at Expect Us to Talk. If you want to drop us an email, expecttotalk@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at Do You Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on YouTube at Do You Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbay, Podbean, wherever you hang your podcatcher, whichever platform you're listening to us on. Don't forget to like us and to share us and subscribe and leave us a glowing review. That helps us to rank higher and attract more listeners. So wherever you listen to us, hit subscribe. Why not share it amongst your friends as well? If you're on social media, send us a tweet, put us a status update on Facebook.
The only one we're not on, the only major platform we're not on is Amazon Music, but we'll get round to looking into it when we can. And by we mean Chris, but there's no hurry because we're everywhere else and he's busy. He's just moving job and stuff.
I query whether anyone actually cares about Amazon Music. I mean, does anyone really listen to?
I don't. I'm not on there.
I was listening to it today while I was out, but I do. I do my podcast through Spotify now, though. I was on Apple too recently.
We're also on Spotify as well. No, I tend to do Stitcher these days.
Yeah.
On my old-fashioned Nano.
Okay. All right. So before we do all *5 westerns ever made, what's next, Becca?
Yes, before we do all the westerns, Do You Expect Us to Talk will return with our Bond commentary, which is my selection, Tomorrow Never Dies.